Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to be walking you through the entire process of deploying an ADK agent to the cloud and then connecting that agent to a fully deployed NextJS application. And by the end of this tutorial, you're going to have this application up and running, which is a goal planning ADK agent where you can chat with the agent, see its thinking, and everything's fully connected all up in the cloud. And I'm so excited for today's video because this is the #1 requested video from you guys ever since I created the ADK crash course a few months ago. So it's finally happening. And to make things as easy as possible for you guys, I'm adding in all the source code for today's video completely for free. Plus, I'm throwing in a few extra walkthrough guides, one to help you deploy your local agents to the cloud in Agent Engine, and how to deploy your NextJS application all the way to Vercel. Those are a few extra guides I've added in the source code just to help you guys out when you're doing it on your own. And you can download everything completely for free. Just click the first link down in the description below. And if you have questions about anything we're covering today, you can always drop a comment down below, or you can head over to the free Skool community I've created for you guys. We have over 9,000 AI developers of all skill levels. We have free weekly coaching calls, and we have a bunch of free resources. So definitely recommend you checking that out as well. But enough of that, let's go ahead and break down everything we're gonna be covering today step by step. Okay guys, so here's a complete breakdown of everything that we're gonna be doing today, which can really be covered in 2 phases. So in phase 1, we are going to be covering everything related to ADK. And in phase 2, we're gonna be covering everything related to Next.js. So here's the exact breakdown of what we're gonna cover in each phase. So in phase 1, we're first gonna start off by looking at our local ADK agent. We're going to review the actual agent so you can see just what it can do, and we're going to do a quick demo so you can see it up and running in action. Then we're going to hop into deployment. So this is the most important part where you're going to see how to take your local ADK agent and deploy it over to Agent Engine so it's running in the cloud. This is going to set us up for success eventually when we have our Next.js application deployed so that they can talk together. And once we have everything deployed to Agent Engine, I'm just going to do a quick overview of some of the most important concepts you need to know about ADK in the cloud. Then we're going to hop over to phase 2, and this is where the rubber meets the road, because this is where we're actually going to see like, okay, cool, I have a web application running. How the heck do I get my Next.js application to actually start talking to my agents? How do I do that? And that's exactly what we're going to be covering, because the process for getting your Next.js application to work in local development mode is a little bit different than how to do it in production when we have everything deployed to Agent Engine. And don't worry, I have everything covered for you. And then finally, I'm going to show you, once we understand the code, we're going to deploy it. Super simple to walk through how to deploy your Next.js application over to Vercel. You're going to love it. It's super straightforward. And don't worry, I have guides for both deployment processes when it comes to deploying to Agent Engine and when it comes to deploying to Vercel. So once again, you can download everything down the source code below. But yeah, we have a lot to dive into today, guys. So let's go ahead and hop over to the terminal and code editor so you can start to see our ADK agent in action, and we'll start diving into some of the code. All right, so let's dive into our ADK code so you can see how everything works. And before we do that, I just want to point out a few important files that we have set up in this project for you guys that you can download completely for free. Just click the link down in the description below again. But here's everything that you need to know. First off, we have 2 high-level projects. We have app, which is going to allow us to have all of our logic for our ADK agent. And then we have Next.js, which is going to have all the logic for our front-end application. And to make things easier for you guys, there's a few extra important files that we need in here. So there's going to be a make file, and basically if you haven't used make before, it's just a really nice tool to where you can just run make and it'll just run commands for you. So in our case, we have a few commands to help us out here. We have a command to run ADK web. We have a command to run our ADK as a backend API server. We have a command to run our front end Next.js application. And then we have some additional commands to install everything and basically just set us up for success. The final project file that you need to know is the fact that this has dependencies. So we have a PyProject.toml, which is just going to include all of our ADK environment variables that we need. Sorry, our ADK dependencies that we need. So that's a high level overview. So now let's actually dive into the code so that you can see what is actually going on. So let's zoom on in so you can see the code. Now, everything is going to be inside the agent.py when it comes to just running the actual agent locally. So if you hop into the agent.py, you will see that there's a single root agent. And per usual, if inside of ADK, a agent needs to have a name, model, description, and instructions. And just as an added bonus, I added in planning so that you can actually see one of the newer features that was released by ADK. So if you have any questions about ADK, 10 out of 10 recommend checking out the ADK crash course that I built for you guys a while ago. I'll have a link to it down in the description below. But if you have a question on anything that you see right now, definitely recommend checking out where we start with like building your first simple agent all the way to building multi-agent orchestrations with sequential workflows, everything that you could possibly want to know about ADK. But with all that out of the way, let's just like dive into like the core concepts that you need to know when it comes to running this agent. So the purpose of this demo application is that we're making an agent that's going to help us take in goals and break them down into actionable steps that will help us achieve our goals. So that's the entire part of this application. So it's going to, let me just show you what it's going to do. It's going to take in a goal. It's going to break it down into subtasks. Each task is going to have subtasks. It's going to prioritize and just, help us break everything down. Super straightforward. And we've given it a very specific output format to where it's like the agent's understanding of the goal, every task it needs to create in a certain order, what it needs to have for subtasks, and everything else. Super, super straightforward agent. And the only thing that you're going to see different is the fact that we added in planning. And basically planning just allows the agent to take multiple attempts at solving the problem. So before it generates a response, it'll like, okay, what do I need to do? Okay, cool. I have a thought. I have another thought. So basically, if you've used, any deep thinking models at all, this is the exact setup that we're now providing to our ADK agent. Really cool setup, super simple to add. Okay, so now that you've seen ADK, the agent that we're building, let's hop back over to our make file because we're now going to run our agent locally so you can see it all in action. So what we need to do is run this command right here, which is going to do uv run ADK web. So ADK web is how we're going to actually like interact with our agent in the web. UV run is basically going to make sure that we use our pyproject.toml file. It's going to make sure we have the environment. It's going to do everything that we need. And it's going to run it on port 8501. So let's go ahead and run this. So we just need to type in make, and then we're going to type in ADK web, and this will spin up everything on port 5001. We can go ahead and open it. This is an old version, so I'll start over. Great. So we're going to have a new session. Yep. So we now have a new instance running and you can see we're getting traffic. So everything's looking good. So when you open this up, it's going to give you a few different options of which projects do you want to use. And in our case, app is the one that contains all of our logic for our agent. So once we have this set up, what we can do is actually start interacting with this agent. So we're going to turn on token streaming so we can see in real time the responses from the agent. So at first, we're just going to say, sorry, I need to close this out real fast. There we go. So now we can type in, hey, and the agent will respond and you'll start to see its current new approach to where it's going to always have a thought because we have planning turned on and then an actual response from the agent. So we can say, hey, let's say, hey, I would like to get hired at a FANG company in the next 12 months. So this is just an example goal that we could pass into our agent. And then you can see it's in real time, breaking it down into sub thoughts. So it can really decompose the task we're giving it and then come up with a really good plan for us that we can, help us achieve our goal. So you can see it's following that exact format that we set up in our agent. And like I said, nothing revolutionary here with what we're doing with ADK, simple single agent that generates an output for us. So now that you've seen ADK in a nutshell, what I want to do is now hop back over to our code. And now we're going to start going through the deployment process so you can see how we can take this local agent and start to deploy it to Agent Engine in the cloud. It's super straightforward. We just have to enable some services. So let's hop over to the next step so you can see how we can deploy this to the cloud. All right, so now it's time for us to deploy our ADK agent to the cloud inside of Agent Engine. And thankfully, I have set up this deployment guide that we're going to walk through together step by step. And it's going to show you exactly everything you need to set up in Google Cloud to get your project up and running. So first things first, we need to head over to Google Cloud itself and create an account. So if you just type in Google Cloud in your browser, go ahead and log in. And once you log in, you'll probably have to create an account if you've never made one before. But if you have made an account, you'll just click console in the top right-hand corner. This will actually take you to inside the Google Cloud console to where you'll be able to see your organization that you set up during the setup process. And if you have any active projects. In our case, we want to create a new project together. So we are going to create a new one. So what you can do is in the top left-hand corner, you'll click your active projects, and this will bring up a project selector, and you're going to click new project. Inside of here, we're just going to call this deploy ADK dev YouTube, and everything else we're going to stick to our main organization, and we're going to click create. Now, this will take just a few seconds, but it's going to create our new project inside of Google Cloud. Then we're going to select the project, and you can see it changes in the top left-hand corner. So boom, everything is good. We're in our project. Now we're going to start walking through the process of enabling all the APIs that you need in order to work with Agent Engine in the cloud. And in case you haven't heard of it, Agent Engine is basically just the way that you can deploy any ADK agent and have it actively run all for you. It's completely managed. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to Vercel.ai, and whenever you head to this page, it's going to ask you to say like, hey, we need to enable some APIs in order to actually use Vercel.ai Studio. So you imagine it, basically Vercel.ai is all of Google's features, and then within Vercel.ai, there is Agent Engine. So that's the relationship right there. So we're going to say agree and continue. Then as soon as that's done, what we can do now is it's going to take a few seconds to enable all the new different services. So that is a great start. Now we want to make sure that we enable a few extra APIs. So if you get this, just go ahead and click enable API. That is going to add a few more. And now what we're going to do is enable billing. Now, billing is super important because at the end of the day, we're using AI, which costs tokens, and tokens cost money. So you're going to need to enable billing in this, and it's going to cost realistically a few pennies to do everything that we're going to do now. So super, super affordable. And if you just signed up, you'll get a ton of free credits, and that will just really help out. So you don't have to worry about paying if that's the case. So you're going to type in billing, and then you're going to go to projects. So billing projects. Now, once we're in here, you're going to see all of your different projects that you have set up. So in our case, we were working on the deploy ADK dev YouTube, and you can see whenever we enabled some of the services, it automatically added it as an extra account for billing. So if for whatever reason it was one of these other projects down here and it wasn't automatically added, what you would do is just click the three dots, and then you would click change billing, and then you would say, we'll go to no billing account. Sorry. What you normally do is just do change billing, and then you would drop in and put the name of it. Since it's already automatically added to my billing account, I didn't have to worry about it. So life's good. We have billing set up because we can see it right here, and it says the billing account number. Fantastic. So now that we've knocked that out of the way, let's head over and keep knocking out some of these additional instances. So we need to add in a few additional resources. So we're going to check out each one of these one by one just to make sure that they were added. So we're just going to keep opening up a few different browsers to make sure everything is set up. So it looks like Google Cloud Storage is set up. That one's awesome. We want to make sure Cloud Build. So Cloud Storage, just a quick heads up, because I think a lot of this is important too. Every time you build your ADK agent and deploy it to the cloud, what happens is the code gets shipped to the cloud. And once it's in the cloud, Google will build the project with all the dependencies and everything else that it needs to run. So it needs, once it makes the build, somewhere to store it, and that's going to get stored in cloud storage. You'll see that later on. So the next thing that we need to set up is we want to make sure that we have our cloud build enabled, because this is what's going to actually take our source code and build the agent in the cloud. So we want to enable that one. That's going to take a few seconds. Then we want to set up the cloud run instances. So we're going to go to another tab, run this one. This should enable that. And then we have one final one, which is artifact registry. So we just need some way to keep up with all of our different builds as we deploy different ADK versions. So we're going to go to this final one, and then we should be good to go. So yep, it was already set up. Life's fantastic. Billing is already set up as well. So now what we need to do is start working on some of these different permissions. So we're going to head back over to Agent Engine and start adding in some of these permissions inside Google Cloud. So let's go ahead and head back and knock this out. All right, so now we're at the step to create our IAM permissions. And just as a quick update, what we're going to be doing is create a service account. And what that service account is going to do is have access to a few different resources. And basically, we just want to make sure that this service account can access the information it needs to do. In our case, we're creating a service account that is able to access Vercel.ai because obviously we need to access our Agent Engine instance to make requests to it. And the other one is going to be a service account token creator. This is going to help us on our front end project whenever we're saying, hey, front end, please make a request to, the cloud, in our case to Agent Engine, to submit a request. We need the ability to make sure that we're making authenticated requests to the backend. So that's exactly what we're doing. So here is everything that we need to do to get this up and running properly. We're going to head back over to Google Cloud. Then we are going to go to I am. And inside of here, we are now going to start to create a few new service accounts. So in our case, we need to scroll down to service accounts. We're going to click create new service account. And in our case, we'll just call it ADK FE for front end. And we'll just call it service. And then from there, we're going to click create and continue. Then we're now going to start adding roles. Now this is where we need to start typing in everything that you saw over here. We need to start adding these in. So we're going to add a new permission to say Vertex AI user. And then we're also going to add a new one for service account token creator. So add that in as well. Fantastic. So now we have a new service account that we'll start to use in just a little bit. And now we can click done. So fantastic. You now have a new service account. You can see that it has a email. We're going to add that later on. Don't worry. But this is the service account that's going to be able to make requests and actually use our application that we're building together here today. Fantastic. So now we can move over to step 2. And this is where we're going to create a storage bucket. Now, the storage bucket, what it's going to do is when we go, all right, I love my ADK app. I want to deploy it to the cloud. Like I mentioned a few times, is we're actually submitting that code to the cloud, and the cloud's going to take that code, build it, and it's going to create an image, and it needs somewhere to store that image. So that's what we're going to be using for our bucket. It's going to be a staging location for all of the images that are getting created of our ADK agents. So here's what we can do. We're going to head back over to our code, and we're going to go over to storage. So we're going to hop in over to buckets. This will work great. And now what we're going to do is just call this deploy ADK dev YouTube, just to match the name of our project. Heads up, this has to be unique. So you and your project won't be able to use this name because it has to be, as you can see right here, globally unique across all users everywhere. So let's go ahead and click continue, see if it's available. It is. So now what we can do is just walk through and start to use these commands right here. So location type, we're going to go for just a single region. It's the cheapest. This looks great for me, US East 1. Obviously, if you're somewhere else, you might want to update it, but or for an application we're building, you don't have to get super crazy with it right now. You will see in multi-region, it does cost a little bit more when you start to actually add in like additional regions. So it's per region per month. So we're just going to use one, nothing crazy here. Now we're going to click continue. When it comes to choose how you want to store your data, we're just going to go with some defaults here. How do you want to control access? We don't want public access. So this, if for whatever reason our bucket got leaked, the URL to it, we don't want people to just automatically be able to pull information out of it. Then finally, when it comes to delete, we'll just continue with soft delete. Basically, just use all the basics. So we're going to prevent, and now we finally have a bucket. So this is looking great. So now we can move over to the next step, which is going to be setting up our local computer to start interacting with Google Cloud. And the way we can do that is by using the Google Cloud CLI. So I already have this set up on my end, so I'm not going to walk through downloading it, but you can just follow these links and you'll be able to download the Google CLI. But I will show you how to go through this part right here, one step at a time, so you can actually log in and start playing with Google Cloud on your local computer. It's pretty cool that you can control it from your local computer. So we're going to type these commands in one at a time. So I'm going to say, hey, I would like to log in. So we're going to log in, and then this should bring up this window right here. You want to log in with your email account, say continue. It should take a second. Fantastic. You are now authenticated. Now we want to set our default project. So paste this in. Now you're going to delete the project at the end, and you can head back to Google Cloud, and you'll just click the root Google Cloud, and you can see your project ID right here. So I'm going to copy it, paste it back here, and then fantastic. So now we have set your default project to use this one. And then we're going to run Google Cloud config list just so we can see everything about our project. So you can see, most importantly, the account that we're logged in as, and you can see the project. You want to make sure that matches your project that you have set up in the cloud. And this is the default. So every time you open up Google Cloud, it's automatically going to use this project. Pretty cool. So we got that knocked out. So now what we're going to do is start working on setting up our environment variables folder. So this is what's going to allow our local agent to actually start using some, it's actually going to allow it to start working. And the reason why, I'll explain. First, right now we are going to be using Vertex AI for our ADK agents. So that means our local instance is actually connected to Google Cloud, so we don't have to worry about API keys and all of that. It's just saying, hey, I'm authenticated to the cloud. Just use me and I will make sure all the authentication and everything's working, and I'll allow you to start using tokens. So in that demo that I showed earlier where ADK was running, that's why I didn't have to like pass in like a Gemini API key. We want to use Vertex. Now, in order to get this working, we need to update everything here and here. So let me walk you through what you'll need to update. So for Google Cloud Staging Bucket, we want to update it to use our new name. So if we hop back over to buckets, you can see this is the name of our bucket. So we're going to save that. Then you'll want to leave US Central 1. Just leave that one. Reason why is Vertex AI only works in certain locations, and it for a fact works with US Central 1. So just leave that there. And then when it comes to Google Cloud Project ID, you already know how to find that. You guys are pros. So we're just going to copy it from right here. Fantastic. So we're going to replace that. And now we are looking good. So we're going to keep following our instructions. We are pretty much almost done, guys. So we can now see that everything, we're going to just go through the checklist. We've already set up Google Cloud. We've enabled APIs. Billing's good. Buckets are good. CLI is good. And we know our default project, environment variables. Everything is looking fantastic. So now what we can do is start to work on the next section, which is where we're going to start actually deploying it to Agent Engine. There are, just quick side note, there are multiple ways to deploy your ADK agents to the cloud. One's Cloud Run and one is Agent Engine. Agent Engine handles all the complexity for you. You don't have to worry about creating Docker images, or you don't have to worry about anything. You literally just say, here's my code, take it, run with it, and let me use it. So that's why we're using Agent Engine. It just makes it so much simpler. So we're now going to start working on the deployment process step by step so you can see it all in action. So let's start knocking this out together. Okay, so what we need to do in order to deploy our ADK app to Agent Engine is we really need to run one script that I've made super easy for you guys so that it just works with a single command. So we just need to run the make deploy ADK command. If you head over to our make file, you'll see that this command does two things. First, it does an export of all of our dependencies to a requirements.txt file. This is super important because when we're trying to deploy to Agent Engine, we need to say, hey, here's my source code for the actual agent itself. Also, here is all the dependencies you need to install in order to run this code. So that's exactly what we're doing here. We're saying, hey, let's go ahead and prep all of the dependencies because now we're going to start working on running the deployment script. So if you head over to Agent Engine, what we can do is start to go through this step by step. And you can see the whole point of this entire script is to run deploy agent to Agent Engine. So here's the 4-step process that this code runs through so that you can see it all in action. First, we want to make sure that we get all of our deployment configurations from our environment variables. So a second ago, all of those different environment variables that you stood up, such as the project, the staging bucket, all of that, we want to, basically keep the same. Next, we are going to add in a new bucket. This bucket's just going to be done for logs. So you'll see that in a second. Then we're going to run the command to deploy the agent to Agent Engine. And then finally, we're going to save some metadata about the deployment. Just in case something goes wrong, we can actually look to see, oh, I see exactly where it broke. So let's go through this together. So first step, we just want to make sure our project is set up to work and has all the information, Agent Engine has all the information it needs in order to get the deployment up and going. So you can see what we're doing is basically some validation. So we're just going to say like, okay, do I have the project ID in my environment variables? Yes. Do I have the staging bucket? Yes. Do I have an agent name? Do I have my requirements file? Do I have all of that? Great. We're doing good. The next thing that we're going to do is actually get the source code that we want to deploy over to ADK. Now, in our case, what we're really trying to do to deploy from ADK to Agent Engine is all we're really trying to do is just say like, hey, I want to deploy the entire app folder. So if you actually come back over here, you can see we have this app folder. This is really all we're trying to do. Just like, hey, all the source code in here, can you go push it over to, basically go ahead and push it over to Agent Engine. So we're just getting our packages up and running. And so that when we're running the deploy script, it knows which code to copy to the cloud. And then finally, everything is going to be good. So now we're going to end up with this nice little dictionary or nice little class of all the information that we need to properly deploy to the cloud. Fantastic. So now that we have our deployment configuration set up, we can now move over to the next stage. We can actually drop this one. That's not needed. We actually clean that up. Now you can see there's a thing of number of workers. So this is basically how many parallel instances of your app do you want running? We're just going to keep it to 1 for simplicity. And then next, we're going to start working on making that second bucket that's going to store our logs. So you can see down here, we're going to create a new bucket name, and it's basically just going to store our logs right here. So it's just going to take our project, our agent name, and add some logs. So this is a really nice dynamic way. So if you keep adding new agents, it'll automatically create new buckets for you to match that. So pretty cool. Now, here is where the fun stuff happens. This is where we now get ourselves set up to deploy. So if you remember, Agent Engine lives inside of Vertex AI. So we need to initialize Vertex AI so we can start running commands. So we're going to say, all right, Vertex AI, I'm using this project. I'm deploying to this location, and here is my staging bucket. The 3 core pieces of information Vertex AI needs to properly work. Next, we're going to go ahead and read that requirements file that was automatically created for us. Quick reminder, we made it right here in our code. When we did UV export, it put everything in that requirements.txt. So we're going to go, okay, I now have that requirements.txt file. Oops, sorry. And now I'm pretty much ready to go. So now what we can do is say, all right, Vertex AI, I would like to start using the Agent Engine app to create a new instance of Agent Engine for the specific agent I'm working on. So you just point to the root agent. So in our case, this is our, planning agent. And then we point to a artifact service builder. Now, what the heck is this? Well, this is what's going to take the code, and it's going to actually create a Docker image that's going to be able to run our agent. So the Docker image is going to contain all the source code requirements, and just, anytime we want to run everything, it's just going to spin up. Hey, I'm ready to take in request, and then it's going to send a response back. So that's everything that we just did. Now we're going to keep cruising along. So you can see when it comes to setting up our agent, we now have our agent engine set up. We are having some display names and everything. We're just bundling together. Now what we get to do is start working on deploying it. So I've set up the script for you guys. So it'll deploy or update the agent depending on how many times you run it. So if it's the first time, it's going to create it. If you run it the second time, it's just going to update it. So it's super straightforward. So we can just easily check to say, hey, Agent Engine, please list all projects that have this name. And if it exists, we're going to go, cool, I want to update it. If it is new, we're going to create it. So you can see the command for running it though, super straightforward. We're just using Agent Engine, calling the create command, and we're passing in that agent config that we set up right here, which is just the culmination of everything that we've worked on together. So that is super straightforward. Then we're going to save some of the metadata from everything that just happened, save it, and then we are good to go. So that is the entire deployment script. So I'm going to run it with you so we can all be on the same page. So let's open up our make file so you can see the command, and we'll run it together. So it's called deploy ADK. So now let's run it. So we're going to type in make, and we're going to run deploy ADK. Now, this should take just a second. So first off, we're exporting all the requirement variables. Now we're going through the process of deploying to the cloud. So you can see it's deploying. You can actually check out some of in real time, the progress by going to some of these different links. So we're just going to give it a second because it usually takes a second, but I will point out a few other things. You can see it's using our bucket. You can see it's writing all the different packages and files it needs to our bucket, and everything is looking good. So now it's spinning up Agent Engine, and then now it's just going to take usually a few minutes to spin up. So we'll hop back as soon as it's done. Okay, so it just finished deploying to Agent Engine. So you can see down here at the bottom, everything went well. It actually took roughly about 10 minutes. So if you're like, oh my gosh, it's taking forever, you have two options. A, just wait, grab a cup of coffee. B, if you just kill it and then redeploy it, it's not going to break anything. So if you feel like it's hung up or something, feel free to deploy it again and it'll just go through it again. Sometimes the first time takes the longest, and then every time after that, it cruises through super fast. So now let's go verify that it did everything correctly. So we're heading back over to Google Cloud. There's a few things that we can do. First, we can go check out our buckets. So you can see now we have 2 buckets. So bucket 1 is the one we've already made, and the other one is going to be our logs. So if we come in here, you can see these are going to be our agent logs, and as we run it, there will be data in here. The other one is going to be our actual agent engine, and this is going to contain, basically, this is our staging location. So this is where you can see it has a pickle file, a requirements.txt file, and all of our dependencies in a bundle. So everything right here is set up, and this is what Google uses to go, cool, here's everything you need, and then boom, push it to actually build a container. So that is everything over there. Now what you can see is if we head over to Agent Engine, you'll see that over here we have a new agent up and running. So this is pretty cool. Your agents are now deployed to the cloud, guys. Pretty freaking cool. So when you click into your agent, what you'll notice is you can start to see data as we continue to use our application. So right now, brand new, so nothing should be popping up, but there's a few important pieces of information that I want you to see. So the first one is going to be, the first question we need to ask is like, well, cool, we deployed this. How the heck do we actually access this in our application? So if you click API URLs, you'll see that there are two different endpoints that you can send requests to. Query is for standard queries to where you send information in and then you want it back synchronously. So this is where you like, hey agent, do work. It'll probably take a minute, but once you have the final answer, send it all back to me. So that is the regular query endpoint. And you'll notice that you can tell at the end that it's regular because it just says query. Now, if you want to stream, the other option is to set it up to do the same endpoint, but it is going to be stream query at the end. We're going to use stream query just so it has a much nicer UI to where data is coming back to us in real time, kind of like we saw in ADK Web. The kicker is, so there's like, I cannot express this enough. Server side events, that's what this stands for, are currently broken when it comes to deploying using Agent Engine. So this, even though it's set up to say, oh yeah, please return results in server-side event format, it does not do it at the time of this recording. Google actively knows they're working on fixing this, so hopefully within the next month, this will actually work. This is going to cause problems for us that I've solved for you guys, but just know streaming is going to come back as JSON objects that we're going to have to clean up, not server-side events. And the reason this is an issue is because, when we're working with our local deployment, so this is, we'll say local is going to return everything in server side, but then when we're working with the cloud, it's going to return JSON. So we have to handle these accordingly, and we have the app set up to do this. Whenever Google fixes it in the future and they actually do support server-side events in the cloud, you'll be able to really simplify some of our NextJS logic that you're going to see in just a second. Yeah, so everything is set up. These are super important. You now know how we can start to send information to these different endpoints right here. And just the main thing that you need to know is it's actually pretty standard. The only thing that happens is like, here's our project. And then with the other piece of information is where is this hosted? US Central. Finally, every application, every time you deploy a new agent, it gets added under reasoning engines and it has a specific number. So this is our unique deployment number. So if we head back, you can actually see it. It's right here. So this is where we're going to start to send information. In deployment information, you can start to see, yep, here's all the buckets that you just saw a second ago. Everything is looking good. Number of workers, we had this set up in our script. So yeah, you guys have a fully blown deployed ADK agent to Agent Engine. So, pat on the back, you guys have this up, it's running. And what we're going to do next is hop over to NextJS land and actually spin up our local application. And we're going to first show how you can have it connect to your local ADK agent. And in part 2 of that, you're going to see how we connect our NextJS application to Agent Engine right here. So let's hop into the code for NextJS and start diving into some more code. So before we dive into the code on the NextJS side of things, I just want to show you guys high level what we're about to do when it comes to sending messages, because at the end of the day, that is the most important part, because our NextJS local application is going to send a message to our agent, regardless if it's in local deployment or in the cloud. The message sending process is the most important part. So let's go through the logic together. I'll answer all high-level questions, and then we're going to dive into the actual code once we understand the high-level flow that we're trying to achieve. So, and just a quick reminder, everything that we're looking at now is all happening inside of NextJS land, and these are all the different apps and components we're going to be using today. So let's go ahead and look high-level exactly what we are doing. To start off, what's going to happen is the user is going to type in a message in one of our components, and then they're going to hit send. This is going to try to hit the run server-side events side of things. So this is going to then trigger us to go to the next stage. Because if you remember earlier at the cloud deployment process, I mentioned that Agent Engine handles these requests differently than local development. The key issue is that in the cloud, they do not support server-side events. They support streaming, but they do not support server-side events. So here is the workaround. We check, hey, are we in the cloud or are we local? Let's go through the local side first so you can see exactly what happens. Well, when we're going local, we really don't need any environment variables for authentication or anything thing like that. We just know it's on local host, so it's up and running. Then we can send our request to our local backend server. From there, the server is going to send us back some information. It's going to send us back a payload that's going to be in the format of a server-side event. And what's really happening, just so you can see it in action, because I think this is super important to note, we have 3 different services. So we'll call each one something different. So let's do this. So we have the front end, then we have the back end, and then we have ADK. So what's really happening is our server is going to go, okay, cool. So what I know is happening is the front end is going to send a request to the back end. The back end is nothing more than really a proxy. What I mean by that is we want our back end to just say, okay, cool. You want to send a message? Great. I will literally just forward that message to ADK, whether ADK is in the cloud or in our local computer. And the second ADK gives us back a response, the back end is going to receive that request and then forward it back to the front end. That is the entire loop of what is happening in our code. So it's just a simple proxy. That's the most important thing to understand. So let's zoom out a little bit. And then once we get information, we are just going to serve it back to our front end as server-side events, and we're going to set it up in real time, just so the user gets that really cool, nice looking streaming effect that looks really great on agents. So that was the local host approach, which we're going to test out first, which is super straightforward. Now I want to walk through the cloud approach just so you can see how it's a little bit different. So whenever we go, oh, are we inside of Agent Engine? And we say yes, because we can tell we're in the cloud. What we're going to do is just verify that we have the proper endpoint set up. So do we have the Agent Engine endpoint set up with the proper engine ID? If so, we are good to start sending requests over. And then what we're going to do is send our message over to our Agent Engine instance, and we're going to hit that API endpoint you saw earlier. So if you remember, it was super long URL /stream query. That's the endpoint that we are going to hit. Then it's very similar to the other approach, but the kicker is Google is going to send us back a payload, and that payload is going to be inside of a JSON fragments. This is the issue right here because it is not a server-side event format. I'll show you that later. Just know JSON fragments are a little bit more hard to handle than server-side events. So we have to do a little bit of massaging of the data to get it ready to stream to the front end. So that's everything that's happening over here in our Agent Engine handler that you'll see in just a second. And then as we receive JSON fragments, we're going to clean them up and then send them back to our front end to where we can once again stream the response in real time to the user. So they can be like, cool, this agent is actually crushing it. I can see it all working part by part. So that is everything in a nutshell. So what I want to do now is I'd like for us to hop through the code and look at the most important parts. And I think what would be the easiest though is if we actually run the website first so you can see all the components before we actually dive into the logic. And if you remember, we have a make file, and this make file makes everything easy for us because we just have to run make dev frontend and it'll spin everything up. So let's clear things out. And now we can type in make dev front end. And this will spin up our local NextJS application on port 3000. So we can hop over here, local 3000. So you can see our goal planner is up and running and looking awesome. So here's what's happening at a high level inside the application, just so you know before we dive into the components, what's going on. So the core lessons you need to know when working with basic ADK in a front-end application is that you can't just send messages over to like you would do with ChatGPT. Because normally with ChatGPT, you would just say, hey, here's a message, generate the text. That is not how ADK works. What ADK wants is for us to first create a session, and that session is going to belong to a user. And a session is going to do nothing more but contain all the messages between us and the AI back and forth. So ADK just needs to have a history of all the messages. Behind the scenes, there's also some other additional information such as state and a few other pieces of information, but this is all getting stored inside of our session. Okay, cool. So basically just the way I like to think of it is a session is nothing more than a chat conversation on your iPhone, except it also just has a bunch of extra data to make ADK run. So in order to create that user and test, we have a nice nav bar, and this nav bar allows us to create users. And for each user, we can create new sessions and we end up with a new session ID. So it just ties the user and the session together. And once that's done, we are good to start sending messages into that session. So we can just type in something like what we can fully do just to get this fully working, just so you can see it all working. We'll run make dev, and this will spin up the front end and it will spin up the back end. So now we should be cooking. So let's refresh our application. Now we'll create a new session. Fantastic. So you can see we actually, don't worry, we're gonna dive into the code in just a second, but you can see now that we actually sending over request, we are creating sessions, everything is looking good. So now what we can do is say, hey, and this will start to actually showcase our application. So you can see it's thinking, you can see a timeline of all the different thoughts. And then at the very end, you can actually see the message from the assistant. And as we type in additional messages, hey, make 1 mil in 4 years as an AI engineer, this will go and trigger an additional message, and it will think, it'll stream back its responses in real time. And once it's done thinking, it will spit out that long message that you saw from beforehand. So yeah, it's streaming. Man, this is looking slick. So everything is looking great, guys. So what we're going to do next is hop into the code, and I'm going to break down all the core parts from you part by part. So we're going to start off with creating the session. Then we're going to then dive into sending the messages, because that's the 2 core pieces of information you need to keep in your head as you're building out real world ADK connected applications to Next.js, sessions and messages. So let's hop over to the code so you can see how everything actually connects. Okay, so now it's time for us to break down everything inside of our local web application so that you can understand exactly what's going on. And this is going to be broken up into 2 phases, really. In phase 1, we're going to first look at everything related to creating and listing out active sessions that we have. And then after we've worked on sessions, we're then going to dive into sending messages and populating our message list right here. So we're going to first hop over and view the diagrams so you can see exactly what's happening for session creation, and then we'll dive into the code so you can see the behind the scenes. All right, so let's hop over to the code. Now, I will say at first, this is daunting, but just know this workflow is really split up into 2 parts. Over here on the left, we have creating a session, and then on the right, we have listing our sessions. And the reason it's so complex, or it looks so complex, is because we have to handle things differently for when we're deployed to Agent Engine versus when we're doing things locally on our computer. Don't worry, as ADK continues to improve, a lot of this complexity is going to get reduced, and the way things behave in local should reflect exactly what happens in deployment. But for right now, we're having to kind of handle 2 separate logic chains. So let us start going through the creation process just so you can see what's going on. So whenever we type in a username, so we come in here and we will say YouTube. And after we have a username, we then click create a new session. We're going down this workflow that you can see right here. So what are we doing? Well, first things first, we want to create a new session. And it is important when creating a new session that we have a user, and we eventually will get back a new session. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're calling, hey, create a new session for me. Here's my user ID. Please, ADK, give me back a new session. So let's hop back in. Sorry about this. So it's going to respond with a new session. And from there, what we're going to do is go, okay, cool. Am I working in local, or am I working in the cloud with Agent Engine? In our case right now, we are working strictly with the local backend. So what we're going to do is say, all right, well, now that I know that I have created a new session inside of our local backend, I'm going to send a post request over to this endpoint. So in our app, we have a backend route that is basically set up in our ADK server that is set up for apps, the name of our app, then it's going to be our user ID, and it's going to create a new session. Then ADK is going to be sending us back a new session response, and then we're just going to save that. So just as a quick recap, because I know that was a little confusing, everything up here is happening on our code. So this is all happening inside of React. Then eventually, once we get down here, this is all happening inside of ADK. So all the blue stuff is happening on our backend server that's running on port 8000, and it's actually running our ADK code for us. So that's kind of how like everything connects. So now that you've seen what's happening at a high level, let's actually hop into the code so you can see this in action on the front end, back end, and over in ADK land. Okay, so now we're gonna dive through the code, and I'm super excited to show you how we have everything set up because it's done in a pretty clean manner. And I'm excited to dive through everything because we do a pretty good job of managing state throughout this entire Next.js application. So let's walk through it real fast. So first things first, you'll notice inside of our application, we have a single route. So we have one page, and this is our entire page for handling all of our, like this right here. This is our entire page that we have, only one page in our application. Now, what we have to do is we have to manage state between a bunch of different components on this page. So strictly, let's actually, let me get out of this. So you can see actually up top, we have a header. In the middle, we have a message list. And at the very bottom, we have our area for sending messages. So we need to manage state across all of these different components. What is the best way to manage state across all these components? Well, it's to actually wrap everything in a state provider. So we have something called chat provider, which handles everything for us. So you can see we have everything from our session management to our message management to our streaming services. We have everything in this one provider so that we can have all of our core logic shared amongst all of our children components. So I know we're getting a little deeper into Next.js land, but this is just a very clean way of doing it without making the code super, super messy. So in our case, you can see up top, this is where we are handling all of our session logic. So what's happening is this logic right here for our use session. Let me scoot this over so you can start to see things side by side. But you can start to see in our actual application, we have our chat header up top, chat content for all of our messages in the middle, and then our chat input at the bottom. Pretty clean, nice way to set everything up. And you can see inside of our chat header, we really only use everything from our user ID and session ID, and then handle all of the different changes that can happen, such as we update the user ID or we create a new session. So all of this logic is right here. And you might ask, where is all of this logic coming from? And it's happening in our use session provider. So you can see, because I just want to make this super, super crystal clear what's happening. You can see in our use session provider, we're actually generating all of these functions and different state variables right here so that we can access them inside of our child elements. So that's exactly what is going on. So whenever I click, whenever I edit the username to, like and subscribe and I press enter, okay, cool. What we just did was handle the user ID change. Now, whenever I go to send a message later on, this send message is going to have access to that new user ID. So hopefully this is starting to click. So here is the most important function that we're trying to look at right now, which is the handle create new session. So let's hop over to our use session hook and dive into this. So handle create new session. So here is exactly what's happening whenever we create a new session. So first, we just want to do a little bit of validation to make sure that we actually have a user ID attached. Then what we want to do is use some of our server actions. So you can see we have something called a create session action. So we can dive in here to see exactly what we're doing. So inside of this server action, we have some logic to create a session with our service. So you can see what we're doing is, and I know a lot of this is getting nested. It's just really hard to keep it clean because you can see we actually have to change what we do depending on if we're on the front end working with the local ADK engine or if we're working with the cloud where we're having to deploy stuff. So you can see we're like, oh, okay, well, I'm working locally, so I need to get the appropriate session service. Hopefully this is making sense, but basically there's a simple decision tree here to where okay, are we in the cloud? Okay, we need to do one thing. Are we running locally? We need to do a different thing. And just depending on where we're at, we're going to grab the appropriate session provider. In our case, we are working with the local backend session service. So you can see we have all of our logic right here. So here's exactly what this is going to do. We are going to get our ADK app name. Once we have our ADK app name, we also have our user ID, and we're just setting up the path to hit this endpoint. So realistically, we're going to hit something like local host port 8000. And then after that, we're then going to add in apps, app name, and hit everything right here. So this is what it's going to do is just go hit our ADK server that's actually running right now on the back end. Then once we have declared our session endpoint, we're going to get some authentication headers so that we can properly make a request over to the backend. Then we're going to make a request. So we're going to say, hey, I would like to create a new session. I want to hit this endpoint right here. I want to run a post command, and please return back to me a new session. So we're just going to make sure that it comes back with, yep, I didn't fail. There was no errors. And now we can go, okay, great. It looks like we got all of the information from our backend for creating a new session. We're just going to do a little bit more validation to make sure nothing broke. And then we're going to return that, yes, everything worked. We were able to successfully create a new session. And here is the new session ID. So that is how we create new sessions. Okay, hopefully that makes sense on the creation side. Now, what I want to do is dive into the fetching of existing sessions. So let us hop back to our use session hook and go into the new section, which is going to be fetching all existing sessions. So let's clean everything up, and we're going to start going down that branch as well. Okay, so now we're diving into the fetching all existing sessions that we've had a chat with so far. So let's explore the right side of this branch really fast so you can see exactly what's going on. So anytime we load our application again, so let's hop over here. Anytime I load the application, you can see we have all of our sessions right here. So let's actually create a few sessions, create a session, create a session. So you can see I have a bunch of sessions in here right now. If I refresh, you'll see, boom, all of the sessions still exist. So it's kind of like that ChatGPT experience where you can see all of your previous messages. And as we, talk to these sessions more and more, we'll have messages. So let's dive into how we're actually doing this in the code. So we are first going to say, hey, I would like to fetch all existing sessions for this specific user. Then this is going to call the server action, and from there it's going to call the list user session. Now, this is once again all happening inside of Next.js. Some of this is happening on the client side, and then eventually some of this is happening on the server side. And if you remember, we have to start to set ourselves up to figure out, okay, are we working with Agent Engine in the cloud, or are we working with the local backend? Because we have to make different requests depending on which instance we're working with. So in our case, we're going to say, all right, I'm working on the local backend. So what I would like to do is make a request over to our ADK instance. And this is starting to hopefully see a little familiar to where it's always like /apps, the name of our local ADK app, the specific user ID, and then we're going to get all sessions. This will return back an array of all sessions that we had so far, along with their events. So if we've had 5 messages in there, we should start to see, oh, there's 5 messages inside of here. Then we're going to start to say, we're doing a little bit of normalization just because what we get back from cloud and local development are a little bit different. So we have to do a little data massaging just to get it all working. And then we're going to say, okay, cool. Now that I know all the sessions that I have, this is where we're going to dig into each session and fetch how many messages occurred within each session. So if I sent 10 messages in one session, we should get back 10. If I did 2 in a different session, we should get back 2. So this is exactly how we're doing it. So it's almost like we're getting the list, and then for each item in the list, we're doing a follow-up request just so we can showcase everything that's happening. So now that you've seen the high-level overview of what's going on, we're going to dive into this code right here so that you can see from end to end how we're actually fetching services and sessions inside the code. So let's hop on and dive in. All right, so we are now diving into the code, and we are specifically looking inside the header at this specific session selector, because this is what needs to, in the back end, go fetch all these different sessions so that we can show them in a nice drop down just like this. So we're over inside of the session selector component, and you can see it's starting to call some of the functions that you just saw. So first things first, we want to fetch all active sessions. Now you can start to see that we have inside of the session list action. So this is happening inside of our server at this point. So you can see, up top, this is a server function, and you can see it's going, okay, I would like to fetch from our backend all sessions that we have. So this is us making a request over to ADK. So you can see inside of here, once again, we have a session service, because when we're working on local backend, we want to do one thing, and when we're an agent engine in the cloud, we want to do another. So we need to figure out which agent service we have. That logic is getting handled elsewhere. And then once we've picked that, oh, we're working with the local one, we want to call the list session function. So you can see right here, if we're in Agent Engine land, we need to go down this path, but we're not doing that. So we are in this path where we're going to work with our local backend. And you can see if we're working with local backend, we just need to make a request to this endpoint right here. And I do want to show you this really quickly because this is pretty important. So when you're working with ADK, you have to attach different endpoints for different requests. So if we're working with Agent Engine in the cloud right here, we need to actually massage the endpoint. So if we're trying to get stream results, we have to add this tag at the end. If we're trying to just make an synchronous approach, we're just going to do a raw query. If we're working with sessions, we don't add any of this fanciness. However, if we're working locally, all we do is just pretty much just put, hey, I'm talking to localhost 8000 and I'm trying to go to /apps sessions. So we just do this for local development. So just know the way we construct these endpoints is different for Agent Engine and local development. Local development is just so much simpler. So that's a nice thing for us to have. Okay, so in our case, we are saying, hey, I would like to make a request to localhost 8000 / this. Then once we have our endpoint set up, we can start to do exactly what we did last time for creating a session, but this time it's just going to be a GET request to that new endpoint. Then once again, we're going to do some validation, make sure things were responsive properly. Then we're going to make sure that we got back a response, and then we're going to return it back to our server action. Because now that we have all of these different sessions, we are going to map through each session and find all of those different events in parallel so that you can see the message count. So here is exactly what that looks like. So we're saying, okay, 4 sessions. I want to map and find each session. And I want to pull out the user ID and the session ID, and I want to get all the events associated with that session. So we're going to look at get sessions with events. We are working in local development. So you can see we have a function to do this, and there's just a lot of code, guys. So that's the only negative part about getting this set up. But you can see when we're working with local development to get the actual information for a specific session, we update our endpoint to have the session ID. So we're basically going to localhost, let me close this out. We are working in local development. So you can see we're going to go to localhost 8000. Then we're going to hit the specific app, user ID, and we're going to call out the individual session. And the reason why this is important is because whenever you do get all sessions, it's only going to return a shallow result with the ID of the session and the user attached to it, and it's not going to include those events. So that's why we have to do a more detailed follow-up query with the individual session ID and do a deeper fetch to get that information. And this will return back the appropriate information that will have all of the sessions. So you can see now we're going to get our sessions with events. We should be able to get our message count. Then we're going to come up with a nicely formatted data that we can start to show, oh, okay, here is the ID of the session, the user, the app name, last time we had a conversation with it, the total number of messages. And this is everything that we need in order to show this right here. So you can see we created all of these sessions just now. If I refresh, it might, it's still going to say just now because it was so recent. But as we talk, these numbers will update. So fantastic. So you've seen the core loops of listing all sessions, and you've seen how we can create sessions when we're working in a local development environment. So now that we've got that out of the way, we're now going to hop over to the actual sending messages to our sessions to start interacting with our agents. So let's hop over to that map so you can see the core logic loop, then we'll dive into the code. All right, so when it comes to sending a message to our local ADK instance, the approach is pretty straightforward, but there's just some little details that we need to manage along the way. So let's walk through this together, then we're gonna dive into the code. So first things first, when we are sending messages to our local ADK instance, the approach is pretty straightforward. We are going to send messages. This is all going to happen on the front end. So we're going to send messages. Our local chat provider is going to say, yes, you sent a valid message. It's not empty. We're instantly going to add that message to the UI. Then from there, we're going to start to work with our back end inside of NextJS. Specifically, we're going to start working with our /API run event. So this is where, or run server-side event. So this is where we're going to start to send requests from our front end to our back end. And our back end is nothing more than a proxy. So what I mean by that, as we went over this earlier, but basically what's happening is if this is our front end, what's happening, our back end is basically just an area to forward responses to ADK. And as ADK hits messages back to the backend, it just forwards them to the front end. It's just a necessary middle ground. So specifically, we send a message to our backend. Our backend goes, cool, ADK, I have a message for the agent. And then ADK will start to stream back in real time, like, okay, cool, here's a chunk of data, here's another chunk of data. And our backend is just in real time just going to stream all that back to our front end. We can't directly go from front end to ADK. So this is why we have to set it up this way. So and now that you've seen this high level, let's keep diving into this. So we're going to get our request ready, and our local request is going to go, cool, I can detect that we're in our local development area, so I need to send it directly to localhost port 8000. Then you can see on our backend where we have ADK running, it also has an endpoint called run server-side events. And this is what's going to go, okay, cool, I just received an event from the client. I'm going to spin up our ADK agent so it can start to process the results. And ADK is going to start streaming back the responses. So we have no control when we're just using the regular ADK fast API serve. We have no control over it. It's just going to, it's a black box. We put stuff in and it sends back a streaming response. So it's nice. It handles a lot of the complexity for us, and it spins up, nice endpoints for us like this automatically. Then this is where some of the complexity starts to kick in. It's for handling server-side events. So there's a few different event types we have to care about. For example, if the agent is sending us back a thought such as hey, I'm thinking about how to break down this goal. Well, what's going to happen is it will come back as an event. So if it comes back as an event, we need to show that agent action in our timeline. And I think the easiest way to see this is just to point out, let's just do let's make a new session, and how to get hired at Fang in 2 years. So in real time, I'm going to call out what's happening so you can see in action. So these are all events. So these are thoughts. So thoughts come back as events, and we want to stream them in our activity timeline. Then once it's done thinking with all of its thoughts, it's going to start to stream back actual text. So these come back as different objects, which is nice because they come back as different objects so we can handle them differently. So going back to our logic right here, you can see our thoughts came back as events, and the actual raw response for the body comes back as text. So diving into that, we're going to update our timeline as we get back additional thoughts, and we want to live update our front end. Now, the other option is when it comes to getting back text, we want to slowly accumulate all the AI responses as they come in. And as they come in, we want to check for something. So the way ADK works is it's going to send you a chunk, another chunk, another chunk, another chunk. So for every little piece of information, it's going to keep sending it back. Then once it's finally done, ADK is going to resend everything as one massive chunk. So if this was hello, Brandon, how are you? Well, once it's done streaming in those tiny bits of text, it's going to resend the whole thing of, hey, Brandon, how are you? As one big final message. So we just need to be on the checkout and on the lookout for that termination signal. It doesn't come back as oh, I'm done. It just comes back as the full message. So we're just trying to check for it. We're basically building up this message list over here on the left. We're building it up. And then whenever we get back a message that matches this accumulated text, we go, okay, cool. ADK's done. So it was definitely a little complex to figure that out the first time, but hey, you get to steal my homework and all the code that I've written for you guys. It works, it handles all of this magically. So you don't have to worry about it. Now that you've seen how we've set things up, I want to start to dive through with you everything on the front end and back end, and then how we handle stuff as we get back all of the streaming responses. So let's hop over to the code so you can see all of this in action. Okay, so it's time to start our journey from the second the user clicks handle send message. So the second someone clicks this button right here, this is the journey we're about to go on together. And just a quick reminder, all of the core logic is happening inside of the chat provider. So this keeps most of our regular code pretty clean, and all of the core heavy lifting is happening in chat provider. So when you're doing this on your own, just remember chat provider has all the core logic. So you can see that there are a few core areas in here. So one core area is use messages. So this hook contains all of our messages, message count. It contains every time we add a message, set a message. So it contains all the core logic. Then you can see down here, we have the core handle submit message. So this is what triggers the cascading events that you just saw in this diagram right here, where we go all the way from local to our backend to ADK back to our front end. So this is what starts the entire journey. So let's dive in together. So right when we get a message, we want to make sure, we're gonna do some validation, make sure it's not empty. We're gonna pull out the user ID and the session ID. If any of those are missing, we need to quit because we can't, that's not a valid message. From there, we're going to work on creating our payload. So our payload is basically, hey, what is the raw message we're about to send over to ADK? So you can see we're saying, hey, this is coming from the human. Here is the message from the human. We're going to give it an ID just because it expects a unique ID, and we're going to give it a timestamp. Then we're calling add message. What add message does is it instantly adds it to our block right here. So the second we send a message, it's instantly going to pop up right here. There's no reason for it to like send it to ADK, then check. No, we're just going to boom, add it to our front end. So that's what's happening right here. Now, this is where we're going to start sending things off to our backend. Now, there's a thing that we have called a streaming manager, and our streaming manager just handles some of the core events that are about to happen. So you can see our streaming manager has a few event handlers. Every time a message comes back that's updated, and also has a few additional functions in here like set message, on event update. So basically for everything that could happen from the backend, our streaming manager is ready to handle it. So whenever a new message comes in, we get to add that message to the chat. And anytime a new event comes in of like, oh, I thought of something, we get to handle that too. So we have a streaming manager. Now let's go back here, streaming manager. So now you can see our streaming manager, we have something called submit message. So let's go into looking at what actually happens when we do submit message. So we just do one more final validation check. Then we start to work on building our payload that we're going to send to our backend. Then once we have our payload ready, we call start stream. Now start stream, what it's going to do, this happens inside the use streaming hook. So let's hop into this and you can see, one second, it was called the start stream. So let's see, start stream. Fantastic. So you can see when start streaming gets called, we are getting everything set up to work with our backend. So we starting to go down just a little bit because some of this is a little bit overkill, but it is important. You can see we're going to call submit message. And I know there's a little bit of looping, so I apologize for that, but there's just a lot of checking we have to do because of the complexity between local and agent engine. So you can see whenever we submit a message, this is where the fun actually starts to happen. So you can see we have a payload, we have all of our callbacks. The callbacks are going to be handling all of the different, hey, I have some new message. Hey, I have a new event. So for each type of callback, we have something to handle it on the front end. Hey, every time we get a new text event, we have somewhere to handle that. So there's just a lot of things that we have to keep up with state-wise to get this looking nice and clean. So, and also I'll just say this, I hope at some point soon ADK comes out with a TypeScript package manager just so we don't have to build all of this out. But for right now, we have to build a lot of this out ourselves. And hey, like I said, steal my homework, you can use this and you know, everything will work. So at this point, we're about to submit a message to our backend. So now what we're going to do is go, okay, backend, I need to first figure out what endpoint I'm going to send this to. So we have a way, if we're on local development, we're going to send it to one endpoint. And if we're on Agent Engine in the cloud, we're going to send it to a different backend. So all of this gets set up inside of our streaming connection manager. So right out the gate, you can see we are saying, hey, I want to make a request in local development to send everything over to API/run server-side event. That's the correct endpoint. Then what's going to happen is we're going to send off that response and we're going to make sure that what we get back isn't an error. And then we're going to start managing and updating our state. So we're going to go, okay, cool. It looks like I'm officially connected to the backend and I'm ready to start handling all of the server-side events that are going to start coming back. So you can see we have this handle server-side events stream. Now, what's going to happen in this stream is we are going to get back in real-time responses from the cloud. So what's happening here is we're going to start to get the stream in real time. So as we get the stream in real time, what we want to do is set up some decoding. And long story short, what we're going to do is as messages come in, we just want to like add them to our memory. And as we get new messages, we are going to call pump. And what pump does is it's going to start to send those chunks to the front end. So that was complex, but let's break it down simple. So every time we get a new piece of code, we're going from the back end, we're going to read what we got. We're going to look at, hey, what was in that piece of text that the server just sent me? I can see that the server just sent me this chunk. Then what we're going to do is start to process everything that gets sent to us. This logic is a little bit more complex. Don't worry. What we're doing is we're just saying, hey, ADK sent me something. I'm just going to make sure that what ADK sent me, it is a proper server-side event or it's proper JSON, and I am going to just verify that it's good to go. And we're going to start sending that back to the front end. So this is if the line is empty, but if the line actually starts with data, so like if ADK actually sent us back some raw data, we're just instantly going to start sending that back and adding that, we're going to start adding it to our buffer, and we're going to keep building up our buffer until we get valid data. The second we get enough valid data, we're going to push that to the front end. So you can see here, we're going to go, hey, is our buffer populated? It is. Is it valid data? Yes, it is. Fantastic. I'm going to process that server-side event data. And what this is going to do is actually send it back to our front end. So you can see, cool, I'm going to get the raw data from the server-side event. So I'm going to get the text parts, the thoughts, the agents, the function calls, the function response. I'm going to get all that raw data, and I'm going to start sending it back to the front end. So this is where you can see we're going to set the current agent. We're going to call out what function was called. We're going to process if a function did get called. Then from there, we're going to process thoughts. And then finally, if they just send us raw text, we're going to process raw text. So there's a lot of different things that can happen, and we have to manage all of them. Like I said, this is definitely a burden on the developer, but the cool part is, fingers crossed, at some point soon they'll release a TypeScript library, and this would just make all of this as simple as using Vercel AI SDK. So fingers crossed we're getting there. Okay, so fantastic. We just walked through everything for creating this entire branch that you saw right here. So this was sending events to our ADK server. ADK server sent us back a streaming response, and then inside of it, we got to handle everything from text to raw events, and then we got to, using all of our callbacks, update the response. And so that is everything that's happening on the back end and front end. And I'm just going to show you when it comes to processing text, because I think this is like the final thing that you really care about. It is as we get raw text chunks, we want to start updating our front end. So you can see as we get messages, we want to call the onMessage update hook. And the onMessage update hook, all it does is that webhook that we had set up earlier, it just adds the new message, the new final message over and over and over again to get that streaming effect. So is this complex? Yes, but it is thankfully all of this logic I've already built, so you could just literally just copy the code in and it just works. And the main thing is you would just play around with ADK and the rest of it would just work for you. So long story short, that is everything when it comes to locally sending messages from your NextJS application over to ADK. Now, what we're going to do next is hop over to working with actually going through the deployment process of deploying your of your NextJS application to the cloud. And I'm going to show you everything that you need to do to get that done, and a few extra environment variables that you have to set up so your deployed version of NextJS can actually talk to the deployed version of ADK inside of Agent Engine. So let's hop over to the next part. All right, so now it's time for us to deploy our NextJS application to Vercel and properly connect it over to our Agent Engine instance. So we're going to be following this NextJS Vercel deployment guide that I've created for you guys, and I'm going to be walking you through it super fast. So first things first, we need to hop over to Vercel, and the first thing we want to do is click Add New. When we do Add New, we're going to click Project, and then we get to pick whichever project we want to deploy. So in my case, this is the ADK Fullstack deployment tutorial. So I'm going to create this project. Now, inside of it, you're going to notice that right out the gate, it's saying, hey, which framework do you want to do? Well, in our case, we actually have 2 core apps inside of it. And you can fix that by clicking Edit right here. And we want to deploy our NextJS application. Fantastic. So that is set up properly. For the project, I'm just going to call this -YouTube. That looks great. Now, what is important is for us to properly set up our environment variables to connect to our agent engine instance. So I'm going to be walking through this part by part so that we can get this set up properly. So Google Cloud Project, we need to head over to Agent Engine and to get some of these values. So we're going to open up a new window and we're going to head back over to our cloud instance. We're going to make sure that we go to console. Then let's actually get this organized better for you guys. All right, fantastic. So first things first, we want to get our project ID. So we're going to paste that as a value, grab that key right there. What we can actually do is I will paste the values right here and then we'll copy them over. I think that might be the easiest. So we'll do it all at once. So you can just paste this right here. Fantastic. Now we're going to start getting some of the values from our agent. So let's hop back over here. We're going to go to / agent engine. Now you can see we have our agent right here. So this is the name of our agent. So we can set that right here for ADK app name. Then we need to get our reasoning engine ID. So we can get that by clicking inside of our application. Then we can grab our reasoning ID. It is the value right there. The long series of numbers that you're going to see on your screen, that is your reasoning engine ID. So we're going to paste that in as well. Next, we need to get our agent endpoint. So to get that one, you can actually click API URLs. You're going to grab the first one. Doesn't matter which one you grab, we're still going to have to do the exact same thing. Then you're going to paste it right here and you're going to drop off query. So it's going to basically look like how it is right here to where it's like US Central, which is where it's deployed, Google API. It is the name of our cloud project. Then it's the deployment location and the reasoning engine. So that is everything that we need to have set up. Now, here is the final tricky part. If you think about it, we have to set up our local NextJS backend or our deployed NextJS application. So our deployed NextJS application in Vercel, it needs to talk to Google. And in order for it to make authenticated request, we have to add a service account. So in order to create a service account, you actually already did it. We now just need to create the keys for it. So let me walk you through that process super fast. So we're going to hop back over here. We're going to go to service accounts. Then we're going to check out the service account you created earlier. And if you remember, it had some specific permissions, such as, let's see, it had, let's go back, permissions, manage access. It had access to these two. Yep, these are the two important roles. It needs to be able to work with our actual agent engine, and it needs to be able to create service accounts tokens, because that's how we're going to be able to communicate back and forth between NextJS and Google Cloud. So what we can do here is let's hop back over here. So we're going to go to this page where we have our service. We're going to click keys. Then we're going to click add new key right here. And we want to do JSON. Fantastic. So this is all good. And you can see I actually have it now in my download folder. So I'm going to walk you through it all super raw so you can see everything. So bring over this right here, go down, putting on my screen real fast so you guys can see it. Okay. So let's make this, I know it's a little hard to see, but you can see in my downloads folder, I have a new key. So I'm going to call this the gcloud key. Fantastic. Then all you want to do is get the path to this file. So in my case, I'm not going to copy it all. I'm going to take a picture of it and let AI do the rest for me. So we're going to hop back in here, open up a new tab, paste this in, and I'm going to say, hey, please, what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to convert it to base 64. So you can see in here, we actually have some commands to copy it to base 64. So I'm going to say, please follow these steps, but do it for I gave you. So let me explain as that's running in the background what we're doing. So if I actually open up this service account, what you'll notice is inside of it, there is a ton of information. So this is very sensitive. Don't share with other people or else they'll be able to mess with your stuff. But you can see inside of it, there is everything from the project ID, private key, client email. There's so much information inside of here. And if we're adding environment variables, you can't add a dictionary like this. So what we have to do is convert this huge dictionary into just base 64. That way we can actually add it as a raw string. Then we can decode base64 to get back to this and actually have our backend code go, oh, okay, cool. I now know your private key. I now know your email. So that's why we're having to do all of this. So you can now see, let's see. I did a little bit more. Let's zoom out. So you can see it went a little, there it goes. So let me make sure it didn't do anything wild. Oh, it looks like it created an extra key for me. That's totally fine. So I just want to copy this value right here, all of it. Fantastic. It usually will start with EW. For whatever reason, that's just what I've noticed. Then we can come back up here where we were setting everything up earlier. We'll paste that in, and it's a monster of a text. It's not supposed to be on different lines. So let's actually run this again in our terminal. I'll just run this so you guys can see it locally. So it was in our downloads folder, downloads, and then we're just going to run cat on our gcloud key. So we're going to run it, and then we should get back this raw result right here. Like I said, it starts with EW, fantastic. And then we can paste it in here. So it should be on one single line. So that's how you know my initial one was broken. So this looks fantastic. Once you have all of this, you're going to copy it all. Then you're going to hop over to Vercel, and you're going to bulk paste it in. So just paste, and then you can see it did everything super nice for us. So we have our Google Cloud project, our reasoning engine, our service key, our app, our agent engine endpoint, and where the application is running. So everything is set up. So now we're going to deploy this application, and this will take a few seconds. Fingers crossed we don't have any build errors. Hopefully I didn't accidentally tweak anything while we were working on demoing the project. So this usually takes up to 1 to 2 minutes depending on the time of day you do it. So I'm going to come back in just a second as soon as it's done. Okay, so after about another 30 seconds to a minute, you can see it says, congratulations, you just deployed your Fullstack application, and it tells you everything that you can do. So in our case, we're going to continue to dashboard. And at this point, you can see the different domains that you have set up. So if you're new to Vercel, it's important to note that you actually have 2 different endpoints. So for every deployment, Vercel will create a brand new, deployment URL for you. So this will change every time you push a new commit to GitHub. So that one will change every time you push. This one, the domain, will stay the raw domain. So this one, it will be constant. So we're actually going to open up this one. Now I'm going to zoom in. We're going to edit this to say YouTube. We're going to send a new session. So I've actually done this a bunch, so apologize for making so many of these, but we're going to say, hey, how to hired at a FANG company in the next year. So now we are actually deployed at this point. So we have NextJS application deployed in Vercel. This application running in Vercel is talking to Google Cloud, specifically Agent Engine inside of Vertex AI. And Vertex AI is spinning up all the tokens. It's coming up with a response, streaming them back. Now, you will notice this is taking longer than local deployment. A few reasons for that. A, Agent Engine is not 100% working right now for ADK on the streaming side of things. As you have heard me say multiple times today, Agent Engine is sending back raw JSON. So something's going wrong to where it's actually just streaming back large JSON chunks instead of individual server-side events. So that's just something that's going wrong. They know about it and they're actively trying to fix it. I've got to talk to them about it. So, but you can see it is still working 100%. So you can see we have all of our thoughts right here, and it is streaming back our results, but everything is getting streamed back as one big chunk. So it's not true streaming like you would expect. It's just huge blocks of text. So not the biggest. I think they have 1 or 2 small issues to fix, and then this code should just instantly do the regular streaming, but something is happening right now. So this is everything. So you can see it is, it's working. We have Agent Engine deployed, ADK is running inside of it. We have Next.js deployed to Vercel. It's working, and we're able to have the two to communicate. The final thing that I would like to do is hop back into the code and start to go down some of the server side approaches when working with Agent Engine instead of local development. So I'm gonna run through the code real fast. And then after that point, you guys are absolute pros, you're experts. And also if you have comments or questions, please drop it down below. And if there's things that you would like, Google to improve, feel free to drop that down below too, because I think the more people that voice like, hey, I think this would be better, they've been really cranking out a bunch of new features. So the more that you guys voice what you want to see differently, I think the more that they will change and improve. So they've been super responsive to feedback so far. Can't wait to see where this goes in the next 3 months or even further. So let's hop into the code so we can see what's actually happening when we're sending everything in the cloud from Vercel over to Agent Engine. So let's hop on in. All right, we're in the home stretch, guys. So we're now going to quickly walk through a high-level overview of what's happening when we're working with sending messages to Agent Engine, because it is a little bit different than working with deployment. So let's walk through exactly what's happening. So per usual, our front end is going to set up our messages, and it's going to send those over to our NextJS backend. Our NextJS backend is going to then say, okay, cool. I'm now going to, from our run server-side events endpoint, I'm going to format this request to be sent over to Agent Engine. Then once I've sent everything over from Agent Engine is going to handle that request, process the message, and start to send stuff back as JSON fragments. Key thing here, it's not sending back server-side events, even if you tell it to. So that is something that is broken, that is getting fixed. Now, what we're going to do inside of our Next.js backend is convert those JSON fragments into server-side events, because that's what our front end is expecting, server-side events. So we're just doing a little data massage to convert them from one format to the other. So then back on front-end land, what's happening is we're getting those streaming server-side events. We're going to parse them. And this is what pretty much you saw exactly earlier. So you can see that we're going to get AI text. So that's the raw messages. And we're going to get functions and sources. And we're also going to get thoughts and events and everything else. So that's everything that you would have expected to see. So now what we're going to do is actually let's dive into the code so you can see all of this happening and getting handled inside of our code. Okay, so we're doing our code deep dive for Next.js in the cloud, communicating with Agent Engine. So we are going to kick things off by talking about our run server-side events. And this you already got to see a little bit when we were looking at that graph just a second ago. So we've already covered a lot of the front end side of things, where how we're like handling all the front end to handle all the server side events as they like get sent back to us. So we're just going to start right here at when we send the request from the front end to our back end. So let's dive in. So first things first, we are going to verify that the request we got is valid. Then we're going to say, all right, am I in the cloud and I should use Agent Engine, or am I running locally? Because if I'm running locally, I need to handle things differently. So depending on our deployment type, we need to do one of these followings. So if we're in Agent Engine land, we need to handle stream requests this way. If we're a local development, we need to handle them this way. So we're going to hop into handle Agent Engine stream function. And this is where we're going to do a few things. First, we need to properly convert our request data into a payload that we can send over to Agent Engine. So you can see inside of here, this is how you create a payload to send to Agent Engine. You have to add a class method where we're going to say, yes, I would like you to stream back the result as a stream it back. And here's all the inputs that you need, such as the user, the session, and the raw message that I want you to process. Then once we have that payload ready, we're going to get that endpoint. So if you remember, the endpoint for what we're trying to do is that huge Google Cloud URL. And at the end of it, we're going to add stream query. So realistically, we are just hitting this endpoint right here that we have set up. So that is the endpoint we're hitting, specifically stream query, so we get back stuff in small chunks. Fantastic. So now, once we have everything set up, everything's ready, we're going to call the log stream start. So this is actually we have two of these functions. So this is this is just a log function. I apologize. What we're going to do next is prepare our headers. So if you remember, we had that service account that we created a little bit ago. So if we are using Agent Engine, we need to convert that base64 service account, and we actually grab it from our environment variables and convert that base64 back to the raw JSON. With the raw JSON, we're going to call the Google Cloud Authentication Library and actually get back a authentication client and get our access token, because our access token is what's going to allow our Next.js application to communicate over to Agent Engine. Fantastic. So now that we have our proper authenticated headers, we can now send a request over to Agent Engine. So it's going to say, hey, go to that super long URL. Here's our payload. And now we are cooking. So we can first make sure that Agent Engine didn't respond with an error. If it did respond with an error, we need to handle it and just say like, hey, something went wrong. But if it did work, now we can start to dive into some of the actual logic. So you can see Agent Engine is going to send back JSON fragments, and we have to do a little bit of text, basically some encoding and decoding to convert our JSON fragments that we get over to server-side events, because our server-side events are what's going to get sent back to our front-end application so that we can properly show it all. So we're going to read basically all the information that gets sent to us in real time. As we get information, we're going to pass it into this JSON fragment processor. So basically, just heads up what we're getting. It's basically a bunch of, like I said, it's JSON fragments. So it's basically like a dictionary. The dictionary is just going to have some like raw text in it, and we have to convert that to the proper server-side events. So we're just setting up our processor. Then as we get information, we are just converting it in real time. Don't worry about this. The logic's a little complex, but just know the converter does everything for you. Then as it gets raw data, like valid, like chunks of JSON, and converts them to a raw server-side event, it's going to then start to send those results as a stream back to our front end. And once back on the front end, that's where we hop back into all of our connection manager logic, where we're like, okay, cool. You're now getting a server-side event streaming response. Like you're getting the event in real time, start processing that server stream. So that is what's happening. I think the easiest way to see this in action is just to look at some of the logs in our code. So let's create a new session, and I'm going to show you the logs over inside of Vercel, and I'm going to show you the logs inside of our front-end application. So we have a new session. So once again, I'm going to do, hey, how to make 1 mil as a developer in 3 years. So we're going to send that off. The first place we're going to head over to is Vercel. Inside of Vercel, you can actually see all of our logs in real time. So we can actually click the live button for our project. And let's actually zoom out a little bit so we can see everything. So you can see, fantastic. We just hit a specific endpoint. So we can see we hit our backend server API run server-side event endpoint. And you can see that there were a ton of logs in it so far. So you can see, hey, the user sent this message. I would like to make 1 million as a developer in 3 years. Here's the raw request. We're forwarding it over to Agent Engine on that endpoint that you saw earlier. We set up that payload to properly be structured for Agent Engine. Then it's going to start processing all the raw results as JSON fragments. So you can see this is what gets sent to us. So you can see in raw, it's sending us, hey, here's the content. The content is coming back with parts. Each part, so it's an array. So parts is an array, and each object in that array is coming back as one of two things: a thought plus text. So that's all the top, like all the, let me scroll up so you can see it in real time. All the thoughts are coming back in this format, and all of the raw data that's just like the straight up text is coming back as just like text. So you'll see this. So you can see we're getting raw data here. It's coming back as a thought with text. Oh, well, to make 1 million as a developer in 3 years, it's not easy, but here's what you should do. So you can see it's just coming in as a huge piece of text. So then we're getting more data. Okay, cool. So the next chunk of data is another just like fragment of text. So, we're just getting in a bunch of raw pieces of data over and over. And the second we find a new completed part, because if you remember, a part was just basically like an object that had, text. And then inside that text, it had the actual, like data right here. We're actually streaming that back to the front end. So the second we found a new a part, in this case, it was a thought, where we say, hey, here's the, all right, so here's the deal. You can actually see it right here. All right, so here's the deal. So it's actually like streaming the thoughts back in real time. And it's going to keep doing that over and over and over again. So it's going to get more data. It's going to get more data. And it's going to keep streaming all this back to the front end as soon as it gets the information. Now, if you hop into our actual like developer logs inside of our console, you can see, let's make this bigger for you guys. You can see everything's happening over here too. So you can see, hey, front end application, I'm starting to process server-side events. I'm ready to get the streamed response. Okay, cool. I just received a chunk of data. This chunk of data is a thought So, and you can see this thought says, all right, so here's the situation. All right, so here's the situation. The exact same thing. I want to land a job at a FANG company. Then it keeps going back and forth. So every time we get more data, it's going to keep adding it to our buffer. And the second we get a complete server-side event, it's going to populate our messages right here. And this is just going to happen over and over and over again. But I hope this is helpful to actually see what's happening in real time. And like I said, it is a little bit involved, but this is how you can actually have your ADK agents in the cloud deployed and actually communicating back and forth from NextJS over to Agent Engine. So if you have any questions about any of this, please let me know. I know this is a little bit more involved, but hey, the code is all there for you. It's up and running, and I have deployment instructions for NextJS and for Agent Engine. It walks you through everything step by step. And the coolest part is you really can just tweak ADK and just keep this same chat container right here, and it all just works. So let me know if you guys have any questions on any of this. Super excited to hear y'all's response and if there's anything I can help with. So thanks, guys. So I hope you guys love this crash course where you got to see how you can deploy your ADK agents to the cloud in Agent Engine, and how to deploy your NextJS application to Vercel and have everything connected so you technically have your agents fully running in your Fullstack AI web application. And just a quick reminder, if you have any questions, drop a comment down below, or you can head over to the free Skool community I've created for you guys, link down in the description below, and I'd love to help you out on the free weekly coaching calls. But with all that out of the way, there's a ton of other AI related content right here on the channel. Definitely recommend checking out whatever videos popping up now. Cannot wait to see you guys in the future ADK videos, Cray AI, LangChain. If you want it, I got it right here on this channel. But until next time, guys, have a great day. See ya.